A very good evening and a warm welcome to our Madam Principal, Professor Shivli Sharkar, our eminent speakers for today and our respected audiences. Today, the national webinar is titled In Search of Space, Voice and Visibility, Women's Role and Representation in Politics and Advertisement. The webinar is organized by Women's Studies Center in collaboration with Women's Studies Department, Lady Brabourne College, Kolkata. Before we commence the webinar, a humble request to our audience to mute their microphone and put off their video, please. Thank you. Now, may I request our respected Principal Madam to kindly inaugurate the national webinar with her welcome address. Madam, please.
Thank you, Malini. Respected resource persons, Dr. Namrata R. Ganneri of SNDT College, Mumbai, and Dr. Amrita Basu Roy Chowdhury of Lady Brabourne College, respected coordinators and members of the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, respected head of the department, Women's Studies, generic elective of this college, all participants of the college and beyond this college, and our beloved students, a very good afternoon to you all. It's a wonderful occasion when the Women's Studies Center of Lady Brabourne College, in collaboration with the Women's Studies generic elective of our college, has organized a national webinar titled In Search of Space, Voice and Visibility, Women's Role and Representation in Politics and Advertisement. It is now known to all that as a result of naked gender disparity in some major sectors like health, education, occupation, family decision making, etc., women are really in need of space, voice, and visibility. This is sharply reflected in women's miserable representation in politics and advertisement. As a student of politics, I can say that in most of the countries, political participation of women is not at all impressive. Women who are able to acquire decision-making power are mostly from urban and elite groups. The highest percentage of women in legislature is in the Nordic countries at 42.5%, followed by the USA at 22%, almost half. Europe at 21.1%, Asia at 18.4%, Sub-Saharan Africa at 18%, the Pacific at 15.2%, and the lowest in the Arab states at 9.4%. Among the individual countries, Sweden ranks first with 47%, followed by Cuba at 43.2%, and Iceland at 42.9%. In India, it is only 10.7%, which is much less than China and even Pakistan at 21.3% and 22.5% respectively. These data are all collected from the report of the Intra-Parliamentary Union to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, February 2010. As per statistics provided by CSDC, that is a Central Statistical Data Center, the percentage of women in Indian Lok Sabha has consistently been unimpressive. In 1952, it was 4.9% and only increased to 9%, that is less than double, in 1999, and then decreased to 8.2% in 2004. Number of women politicians elected in the Lok Sabha has been increased from 52 to 64 to 78 in the 2009, 2014 and 2019 parliamentary elections respectively. Studies show that gender roles and traditional division of labor, illiteracy, economic barriers, the type of the electoral system, lack of sufficient political training among women, etc., have all been some major factors that keep women away from politics. Apart from this, as some researchers have aptly pointed out, elections have now become a very costly affair. Women are not able to generate large amounts of money to fight elections. And in this race, only women who are supported by their influential in-laws and influential husbands, they can only win. And largely due to this financial inability of women vis-a-vis men, that women's role and representation in the sectors of advertisements too, just like politics, are really miserable. Now, I'm not going to linger my speech anymore because we are all very eager to hear from Dr. Ganneri and Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury. And I will end my discussion, but I'm pretty certain that after their talks are over, a lot of questions will be raised from the members of our audience, and lots and lots of their answers too will be provided by our speakers today. And at the end of today's webinar, I'm pretty certain that everybody present here will be able to know a lot more new things and a lot more new ways of explaining them. I wish today's webinar a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam, for such an invigorating and insightful deliberation. Thank you indeed. Today we have with us two very eminent speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Namrata R. from SNDT College of Arts and SCB College of Commerce and Science for Women, Mumbai. Our second speaker is Dr. Amrita Basu Roy Chowdhury from Women's Studies Department, Lady Brabourne College, Kolkata. Before we proceed further, one small note to our respective audience is that we will have our question answer sessions at the end of both the presentations. Questions can be kindly posted in the chat box. Today, our distinguished speaker is Dr. Namrata R. Ganneri. Dr. Ganneri holds a tenured position in the Department of History, SNDT College of Arts and SCB College of Commerce and Science for Women in Mumbai. Between 2018 and 2020, she held a Commonwealth Rutherford Fellowship at the Centre for Global Health Histories, University of York, United Kingdom. She is completing her monograph on post-independent India smallpox eradication program, which is a projected outcome of the fellowship. She is currently part of an international project, Salt Protest Public Health in Modern India, being coordinated by the University of York and Ambedkar University in Delhi. Her work on this project, also supported by funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, offers a critical appraisal of the contribution of India's first health minister, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. Today, Dr. Ganneri will deliver a talk on debuting the world stage Transnational Activism of Indian Feminists, 1930 to 1960. Without furthering on, I warmly welcome Dr. Ganneri. It's an honor to have you with us, ma'am. Over to Dr. Ganneri.
Thank you for your kind words, Malini. May I just quickly ask if I am audible well?
Yes, Namrata, you are absolutely audible.
All right, let me move on then. Let me begin first by expressing my gratitude to our Madam Principal Shuli Sharkar, colleagues at the Women's Studies Center at Lady Brabourne College, Mahua, Amrita, and others who I do not know but have been working behind the scenes on this series of webinars. I've been fortunate to have attended a few and now feel privileged to be speaking at this one alongside my friend Amrita today. I will now begin my presentation and I have a PowerPoint. If you give me a moment, I will start sharing the screen. I will be, can I move on? So I will be speaking about the work of Indian feminists globally. And I have chosen 1930 because, as most of you can guess easily, this was, in the words of scholar Manini Chatterjee, a turning point in the history of women's participation in the nationalist struggle and broader political participation as well, especially if we think about this period in the context of the post-Sarda Act agitation. I track some of the important changes in this period in terms of interventions made by Indian feminists in the new and upcoming institutions of global governance, primarily the United Nations and the World Health Organization, in the period immediately after independence, or what we popularly refer to as, okay, we are back. Is it all right now?
Yes, Namrata, that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I'll be speaking about some of the interventions of important Indian feminists on the world stage, the institutions of global governance, the United Nations, and the WHO. In choosing this theme, I'm trying to break together 3 lines of inquiry in ongoing scholarship on women and add to ongoing conversations about feminism and global feminists. The first of this is the selection of essays in the recent journal issue of South Asia 2021, edited by Datta and others, which argue against thinking of the 1950s as the period of dead decades of feminism. So they highlight the work done by feminists, whether it was parliamentary work, institution building, or social welfare work, especially by middle-class feminists, as a means to stake claim to gendered citizenship. The second strand of scholarship that I'm talking about is seeing my research speak to the groundbreaking work of scholars like Patricia Owens, who have employed the tools of feminist historiography and archival research to prove that this period was important from the point of view of international politics. This also ties in with recent work which is trying to look at the contribution of women of color, women and women of color from the developing countries to institutions like the United Nations. And here I'm thinking of Rebecca Adami's recent work on women and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The third strand, and it is most obvious sort of a strand, is to look at the activities of the feminists themselves, how they collaborated with Euro-American feminists, how they became increasingly visible and audible in the discourse of feminist scholarship, went to global conferences, and participated in various intra-governmental bodies. And here I'm flagging the work mainly of Annie Devenish, Manu Bhagwan, and Rosalind Parr's recent work, and their work in what has been argued as decolonization of international feminism. I would be seriously remiss if I did not mention the work of Nilandini Sinha, wherein she has showed how the early Indian women's movement had an international orientation, how the first formal affiliations with international women's organizations were established very much during the fight for suffrage, and how the Indian suffragist movement itself was articulated in the language of international sisterhood. Of course, she goes on to argue that this international orientation was also crucially tied to the project of nationalism. So if you look at the concept of internationalism and international women's organization, what do we find? And here I'm enlisting a few international organizations for us to pair our eyes over. So Leila Rupp's Worlds of Women highlights these first three women's organizations, some of the oldest women's organizations: the International Council of Women, the International Alliance of Women, which was renamed as International Women's Suffrage Alliance in 1904, and to which Sarojini Naidu was invited to deliver an address in Geneva in 1920. Though she realized she could not perform any delegate rights at this conference, though she was invited to speak, she did not have any delegate rights because none of the women's organizations at this point of time were member of these international organizations. So this also reminds me to flag the contribution of the Tatas, Lady Hirabai Tata and her daughter Mithan Tata, who was later Mithan Lam, who were in England in 1919 during the first fight for women's suffrage and had tried to establish contact with British feminists. So now, since they were representing the Women's Indian Association, after 1920, in 1921, the WIA, the Women's Indian Association, immediately became a member of the IWSA. And this marks the formal entry of Indian organized women's movement with the international networks. There was also the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which was founded in The Hague. These organizations still exist. It was not as if all the organizational activity was happening only in the Euro-American centers. We also have Indian women participating in the Pan-Pacific Conference in Honolulu and the remarkable Asian Women's Conference, which was held in Lahore in 1931, must not be forgotten. Though this was an only conference, there were no series of conferences that followed. There were 5 countries that were represented, but this is considered a landmark Asian Women's Conference in the interwar period. Subsequently, there have been other organizations on the other side of the divide, and Women's International Democratic Federation, which is associated and identified with the Eastern Bloc, was founded in 1945. And I see that the AIWC also sent representatives to this body. I must qualify my observations largely draw from the activities of the All India Women's Conference, the AIWC, which was founded in 1927, and how it developed its institutional networks beyond national borders. This naturally became possible due to the transnational activities of its members, and the women we are talking about are what admittedly have been described by the scholar Vijay Agnew as elite women. Women of the AIWC belonged to the upper and middle classes, and a number of women began to be educated in mission schools by the beginning of the 20th century. They traveled overseas to continue their education, which meant a willingness to modify or adapt caste rules, such as association with members of different castes, overcoming the fear of conversion, and exposure to Western ideas. Traveling abroad for education also meant that the families were all right with women traveling alone, which was unusual for women, but was increasingly, as we know, acceptable for men by this time. This meant that the families rejected orthodoxy, and the women themselves led very bold lives. If you look at the memoirs written by most women, they recognize international travel as a source for seeding these new ideas. Renuka Ray, for example, talks about her time with the London School of Economics as a very vibrant experience, which opened many doors. The other important feminist of this period, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, also described visiting cooperative farms in Sweden in her autobiography and how this gave her ideas for similar work in India. Travel and foreign contact provided new and innovative ideas and helped also in developing a comparative framework. This remained central to a number of women in this period, especially the ones who I'm trying to spotlight in my work. Rajkumari Amrit Kaur is the first feminist I'm going to be highlighting in today's work. Uh, and there have been several newspaper articles highlighting her contribution to constitution making. The other feminist that I'm highlighting is Hansa Mehta, who you can see here seated to your right. There have been a lot of articles in newspapers and also in international media. For example, here to your left, you can see Kaur being reinscribed on the cover of Time as one of the 100 most influential women of this century. Or Hansa Mehta Memorial Lecture Series, which has just begun in the UN. And the first lecture was delivered by Geeta Gopinath. And there are a lot of popular articles about Mehta now. Just a moment to reflect on some of the remarkable similarities between the two before I talk about their presence in international fora. Both of them were active in the AIWC, as you can well imagine, but it is also important to remind ourselves that both of them identified themselves as unflinching feminists. Both of them held important positions in the AIWC, the All India Women's Conference. Kaur's association began around 1929. She was secretary and then vice president in 1932, also the chairperson in 31, and in 1937, she became both chairperson and the president, and the 1937 conference, as you can well imagine, was an important one. It was just before the just around the elections and after the elections, I'm sorry, and this meant that women had a lot to talk about in this particular conference. Mehta was president of the AIWC in 1945. Both Kaur and Mehta were deeply interested and promoted women's education. Amrit Kaur was the moving spirit behind founding of several women's colleges, colleges of nursing, and most famously, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the AIMS, the flagship institution in New Delhi. And now, of course, there are many other AIMS in different parts of the country. Mehta was a Bombay-based person. She was a member of the Senate of the Bombay University, also a member of the Senate as well as the syndicate of the SNDT Women's University, the university to which I belong, and eventually she also became the Vice Chancellor at Baroda, the first woman Vice Chancellor, I beg your pardon, of a co-educational institution. Both Kaur and Mehta joined the Gandhian nationalist movement in 1930 during the Salt Satyagraha. Both of them became prominent congresswomen. Both of them also became members of the Constituent Assembly. Kaur became a staunch Gandhian, a close confidant of Gandhi, though Mehta conceded that she recognized Gandhi's greatness but was not enamored of him and did not consider herself to be part of Gandhi's inner circle. Kaur never married, while Mehta was faced with scorn for her intercaste marriage. Both women had distinguished public careers and went on to represent India in global fora. Mehta at the United Nations, as you can see in your picture to the right, and Kaur in various transnational bodies, for example, the UNESCO, the International Red Cross. In 1958, the 19th session of the International Red Cross Conference, the first of such conferences, was to be held in Asia under COR's leadership. COR was also associated with the YWCA, which is the Young Women's Christian Association, and most famously at the World Health Organization, where she led the first Indian delegation to the WHO in 1947, and finally, in recognition of all the work that she had done for the WHO, elected president in 1950 of the World Health Assembly. As I will show shortly, both of these women were widely traveled whilst they were young. They remained very mobile all through their lives, which certainly explains their cosmopolitan outlook. There is another interesting parallel, and I thought it would interest many of you to know that both of them have not left any autobiography or bulky memoirs, though they have published speeches, articles, essays, and so on. So we do not have them musing at length about their transnational careers, unlike, say, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, the sister of Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the ambassador to the United States, and many other important diplomatic missions also to the UN even before Mehta. So there is another reason why I have chosen to spotlight Kaur and Mehta in today's presentation, and you will realize this as we go along. What is it that made these women the way we see them in today's times? And I think it is important to dwell very briefly on their family background and their early lives. Rajkumari Amrit Kaur was from the Sikh princely family of Kapurthala in Punjab. Her father, Harnam Singh, had lost all rights to the throne after he converted to Christianity. Her mother was called Priscilla Kaur, and she took the title Lady Harnam Singh after her husband. She was one of the most educated women in India, and her parents were involved in considerable humanitarian work, medical philanthropy, and this had a deep influence on Kaur through her lives. Her mother worked with the Young Women's Christian Association, the YWCA, and this was a commitment that Kaur inherited, as I just mentioned a while ago. Kaur grew up with 6 brothers, and like other elite Indian families, the children were sent for schooling to England. Kaur, being a woman, was a little unusual in being schooled in England, but this had a great impact on the development of her personality. She took avid interest in sports. She was excellent in tennis, played tennis all through her life, and even subsequently remained interested in sports and sports promotion. Her brothers were also well educated, occupying high positions with the British government, and Kaur naturally drew upon her family's political capital, though she was the only member in her family to plunge into the Gandhian movement. This is Hansa Mehta, as you can see, flanked by her husband and by her father. And interestingly, this is the only copyright-free image that I could find of Hansa Mehta for use in today's presentation, but it is very apt because it tells us about the importance of both these men in Hansa Mehta's life. She came from what was called a Sudharwala, or a reformer family in Baroda. Her younger uncle was the first Gujarati to pass the Indian civil service, and her own father was a professor of philosophy in the College of Baroda. Her father, Sir Manubhai Nand Shankar Mehta, eventually became the Diwan of Baroda and also subsequently the Diwan of Bikaner. So there was considerable family clout that existed when Mehta undertook a public career. She went to college with her sister, Jayashree Raiji, and both of them took philosophy as a major subject, which was understandable as her father was a professor in philosophy. She clearly attributes her politicization to her contact with Sarojini Naidu. Naidu remained a lifelong influence, so much so that Mehta dedicates her last book, Indian Women, which was published in 1981, to Naidu. Between 1919 and 1921, Mehta was in England and met all the stalwart nationalists of the time, Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, um, as well as Naidu and her group of feminists. She returned to Bombay and stayed in touch with Naidu, who asked Mehta to accompany her when she visited Gandhi in jail in Sabarmati. But Mehta could not be persuaded to join the Gandhian movement then. She once again went traveling to the US because she realized that the US was taking a lot of interest in Indian affairs, and this, we must remember, is just a little before the Mother India controversy and stuff like that. So 1922 to 1923, she travels in US to understand the education system and see if there was a possibility of facilitating a scholarship for Indian women. On her return, she married Dr. Jeevraj Mehta, Chief Medical Officer in Baroda and Dean of the very prominent colleges in Bombay. Since then, Bombay became her base and she was involved in associational politics of the city, the Bhagini Samaj and other women's bodies until she decided to join picketing as part of the Salt Satyagraha in 1930. By her own admission, the support of her father and her husband was instrumental in her public life, a function perhaps fulfilled in the case of Kaur by Mahatma Gandhi. Please do not be surprised. I will transition to Kaur's and in Mehta's international careers now and build my argument about paying closer attention to the transnational activism on Indian feminists in this period. While some of the details that I'm fleshing out here may be familiar, what I want to do is to give a human face to these campaigns. Kaur was a consummate organization builder and was credited with laying the foundations of the AIWC. She introduced full-time workers. She also started the journal Roshni, also having suggested the name, and she also made the move towards electing presidents rather than having aging queens as figureheads of the AIWC. Curiously, despite her princely heritage and political capital that emanated from this social location, she was identified as a member of female intelligentsia that spearheaded the AIWC. She intervened in all issues on education and franchise, but her most important contribution that I want to flag here is her efforts to liaise with British and international suffragist organizations. She was a leading figure in a series of deputations that gave formal statements and campaigned actively during the second campaign for female franchise. The first roundtable conference, which had been called to discuss the future constitution of India, had women representatives chosen by British officialdom. Kaur led a deputation of 15 members of the AIWC to the then Viceroy Lord Willingdon and impressed upon him the need to have candidates from AIWC representing women at the Roundtable Conference. This was a position very similar to the Congress, and leading a delegation of 9 women members of AIWC, Kaur spiritedly demanded universal franchise and opposed separate electorates for women and withstood severe cross-examination which was conducted by the Franchise Committee, which was touring India and speaking to various groups in 1932. The communal award and white paper brought new realignments, and in this period, Kaur took the fight to England. So, Amrit Kaur, Dr. Muthu Lakshmi Reddy, and Begum Hamid Ali gave evidence before the Franchise Committee and the Joint Parliamentary Committee just before the finalization of the India Act. The visit to London enabled Kaur to rekindle old contacts with British feminists, which were established through her own period of study, and draw upon transnational allyship emanating from her mother's philanthropic work with the YWCA. She spoke at a meeting organized by the London Committee of the Women's Indian Association and gave several interviews to the press to educate the British public about the Indian situation. The association brought several British feminists as regular visitors to the AIWC annual sessions, many of them sharing deep personal ties with Kaur. Uh, Finally, Kaur travelled to Geneva from London, where she lobbied for AIWC representation on important committees of the League of Nations and the International Labour Organization. Though she was joined by women from all the leading Indian women's organizations in making a submission to the President of the Council of League of Nations, historian Rosalind Parr shows that it was Kaur's persistence and careful nurturing of the League officialdom that eventually led.
I'm so sorry, sorry to interrupt, Dr. Ganneri. I'm so sorry, but we can't see the presentation.
But I had blackened the screen for a minute because there is a slide pertaining to this.
Okay.
I think I announced that. Yeah.
Okay. So sorry. We saw that it might be some technical glitches.
Yeah, no, maybe I'll turn it on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. The Kaur was joined by women from all the leading women's organizations in making a submission to the President of the Council of League of Nations. Historian Rosalind Parr shows that it was Kaur's persistence and careful nurturing of the League's officialdom that eventually led to the appointment of AIWC as a correspondent member of the Advisory Committee on Social Questions of the League of Nations, the only non-Western women's organization to enjoy this position. So this was a privilege uniquely accorded to the AIWC thanks to Rajkumari Amrit Kaur's efforts. AIWC's quoting of the League on one hand was in contravention to the official Congress position, which saw the League as imperialistic, and on the other, it enabled the AIWC to bypass colonial authorities and to craft an independent role for itself in world governance. It is important to remember that Gandhi had a very disapproving comment about Kaur's canvassing for the League of Nations. To ensure that the relations cultivated through careful personal contact transform into potentially useful transnational partnership, Kaur had suggested the creation of a new office called the Liaison Officer with Europe, a position that held responsibility for maintaining contact with international women's organizations, the League Secretariat and the ILO to the IWC. Kaur herself served in this position through 1934 and was succeeded in 1935 by Sharifa Hamid Ali, the work eventually being absorbed by the AIWC Secretariat. Kaur's intense involvement with the AIWC helped establish the legitimacy of this body on the world stage and made more than one admirer comment effusively. I quote, Rajkumari was the AIWC and AIWC was her. And this was Renuka Ray, who reminiscences about Rajkumari Amrit Kaur's central position in the AIWC. She had become the foremost feminist voice in the country, and in the words of her friend Hansa Mehta, whom we are seeing on screen now, I quote, it was a matter of great pride that Rajkumari became the first woman cabinet minister of independent India in recognition of her own role in fighting for equal rights for women, as well as in recognition of the contribution the women of India had made to the national freedom movement, unquote. Amrit Kaur had personally interacted with foreign governments, multilateral agencies, and transnational organizations in the 1950s and 1960s, a period which has been seen as a golden period of the big foundations in India. As health minister, this was very crucial India was trying to secure help from various quarters, to battle the refugee crisis, among other things, uh, launch various disease eradication campaigns, and so on and so forth. And this networking, seeking allies in international organizations, was a special skill that Kaur had, and for which she was valued by then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. This engagement was also facilitated through personal networks. Her brother was a doctor, her uncle was associated with the Princeton University, and Rajkumari herself maintained close contacts with American institutions, particularly, for example, the Rockefeller or the Ford Foundations, which was immensely useful for gathering funds for her pet project, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIMS, which was founded and started functioning in 1956. First, with a huge amount of loan, with a huge amount of gift from the New Zealand government, then funds through the Colombo Plan, eventually through the Rockefeller Foundation, and so on. Existing research on international public health alludes to Amrit Kaur's centrality in the field. She was one of the first few women in international health, or what is popularly called as global health today. And we are talking about having more women at the top. And here we have Amrit Kaur being elected as the president of the Third World Health Assembly in 1950, which was a very big thing. We can see her here laying the foundation stone of the Palladi Nation at Geneva for the permanent headquarters of the WHO. This leadership role was remarkable, especially in a time when female representation was rather abysmal in international health. Let me now turn very quickly to Mehta's work in the United Nations. As you can see in this photograph, we have to our right Bodil Bergtrup, who is the Danish chairman. She is addressing the colleagues who are seated around her. Then we have, I would point out, Minerva Bernardino. She was a flamboyant member from the Dominican Republic. We also have the Chinese educator, Wei Sang Niu, who's seated just next to Hansa Mehta. We have representations from Poland, from Lebanon, and France, as you can see here. And this is what is being spotlighted by the United Nations today as the women who are behind the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was adopted in 1948. It was a product of prolonged discussions and multiple meetings in the UN Commission on Human Rights, the UNHCR, which was constituted in February 1946 by a resolution of the Economic and Social Council. Hansa Mehta and Roosevelt were the only two women members of the UNHCR. There was another group which was called the Subcommission on the Status of Women, and you can see this is what it indicates here. And these were the women committee members who were expected to work closely with the UNHCR. The subcommittee on the status of women was tasked with applying the principles of human rights to women, which was to be defined by the CHR. But in turn, Mehta insisted that the members of the subcommittee be present for various meetings of the UN and was the bridge between both of these bodies. She herself was first appointed to the Subcommission on the Status of Women before she, and thereafter she moved to the UNHCR. Her position in the Subcommission on the Status of Women was also cemented because of the presence of two of her fellow AIWC members, Sharifa Hamed Ali, another overlooked figure in international politics, and Hannah Sen. And through them, she ensured that there was always a dialogue between the Commission on the Status of Women as well as the UNHCR. Whilst on the Commission, Mehta was also the president of the AIWC and was involved in crafting the Indian Women's Charter of Rights and Duties. Incidentally, there were 3 women signatories to this charter: Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, Hansa Mehta, and Lakshmi Menon, all AIWC stalwarts. And this is what I was referring to when I said that I'm bringing Hansa Mehta and Amrit Kaur together for a special reason. Amrit Kaur, as Mrinalini Sinha argues, was one of the most articulate exponents of the philosophical foundations of Indian women's citizenship. She had published an article in the Modern Review in 1934 where she argued for women's citizenship on the grounds of universal individual rights, but also invoked the parallel republican tradition of going back to the Greeks that understood citizenship in terms of active participation in the life of the community. She married these traditions and argued for women's citizenship to be based both on rights and duties, and this explains her being a prominent signatory to the charter, despite the fact that by now she was deep into Congress politics and was interned. She was in jail for many years, and this was almost like a return to AIWC to ensure that the Women's Charter of Rights and Duties was passed. Mehta, at this point of time, while she was in the UN Commission, was also the president of the AIWC. She spoke about the UN Charter in her AIWC presidential address in December 1945, making a reference to the Women's Charter and also to the 1931 Karachi Fundamental Right Resolution. In an article which she had written in Gujarati, while she was a member of this commission, she chose to educate her readers by informing them in an article which was called Manavadikar that the covenant, which is called Kharado in Gujarati, Kharado ત્રણ સિદ્ધાંત પર રચાયો છે. એ ત્રણ સિદ્ધાંત એટલે સમાનતા, સ્વતંત્રતા અને ન્યાય. So she said that there were 3 important principles, and they were justice, equality and freedom. And she also insisted that એક મહત્વની વસ્તુ એ છે કે ખરડામાં વર્ણવ્યા પછી કર્તવ્ય વિશે પણ ઉલ્લેખ છે. So there's also a reference to duties along with a reference to rights. Mehta took a copy of this charter to Lake Success, where she was meeting with the Human Rights Commission in May 1946. And when the sub-commission on the status of women found itself struggling to define its own mandate, as well as the meaning and implications of women's equality, she offered this charter as a guideline. Annie Devenish shows, through a comparison of the wording of the principle of the sub-commission with the preamble of the AIWC charter, which suggests the significant role the charter played in shaping the sub-commission's mandate. Throughout her work in the UNHCR, Mehta insisted that the Commission should not promise what it cannot deliver, and the Bill of Rights should not be a mere declaration with no accountability. She wanted enforcement and not mere supervision of the maintenance of basic standards of human rights by the member states of the UN. There was a considerable amount of back and forth. She was constantly in correspondence with Nehru and wanted India to have an important moral position in enforcing both the declaration and the convention. She spoke in favor of continuing the provision of the League of Nations that would allow the UN to receive representation from individuals or groups in certain cases, and wanted people to have a right to petition to the UN to protect their basic human rights and fundamental freedoms. The scholar Khushi Rathore, in her recent article, argues that this was the most important of her commitments to the people of the member countries and not simply to governments. And this was obviously a result of her participation both in the Indian women's movement as well as in the national movement. So to come back to the 3 points with which I had begun my presentation, through a focus on the life and thought of Kaur and Mehta, I have demonstrated empirically that the so-called dead decades of feminism were in reality contributing a rich strand to global feminism. At another level, this was a moment of arrival of Indian women on the world stage and the start of a new phase for India as well uh, in its post-colonial history. The early post-colonial period has been seen from the point of view of the aspirations of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, and his goals in foreign policy. So educated, liberated women lent the new Indian regime international prestige, though it is evident from the way we look at the careers and the transnational activism of these women, the participation in the women's movement had honed their skills, given them adequate leverage to participate in international work. These candidates maneuvered their international careers as much as being simply mouthpieces of their respective governments. When women historically sat at the table, they were also architects of the table. And as Kaur and Mehta participated in international bodies, implementing and influencing policies themselves, they significantly transformed international diplomacy itself. And this, you will agree with me, is not a terribly original suggestion. Finally, surfacing their contributions is meant to go beyond a mere celebration of their participation and leadership to recognition that women contributed to international thought, and this also ties to a broader understanding of emerging work on global governance and multilateralism. With this, I end my presentation, and I want to thank all of you for being so patient with your listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ganneri, for such an epistemic and novel account on transnational activism of Indian feminists. Your scholastic yet lucid presentation is strikingly motivating, unleashing a new space of thought in the discourse of the strands of global feminism. Thank you very much indeed. Now we have with us Dr. Amrita Basu Roy Chowdhury. Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury completed her graduation with honors in English literature from Women's Christian College, Kolkata. She then obtained her master's in comparative literature, MPhil in women's studies, and PhD from Jadavpur University, Kolkata. She has been the recipient of the Junior Research Fellowship of the UGC. Her research interest includes areas like gender and media, genesis of women's studies and women's movement, cultural construction of gender, qualitative research methodology, and cross-cultural literary transaction. She is presently engaged as the state-aided college teacher at the Department of Women's Studies, Lady Brabourne College, Kolkata. She has also presented her research work at various national and international conferences and published in a number of journals and edited books. She has been the recipient of Feminist Theory Workshop International Travel Award, Duke University in 2018. Today, Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury will deliver a talk on Invisible or Undervalued, Women in Post-Pandemic Bengali Print Advertisement. Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury, a hearty welcome. We are all ears for your deliberation.
Thank you so much, Malini, for such a fulsome introduction after Dr. Ganneri's enthralling mesmeric presentation. And before I begin, I would like to thank Professor Shivli Sharkar, Principal, Lady Brabourne College, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Madam Principal. Thank you so much. And now, may I request Arvindji to run my PowerPoint presentation? Thank you, Arvindji. My topic for today's presentation, as already mentioned by Malini Mukherjee, Invisible or Undervalued, Women in Post-Pandemic Bengali Print Advertisement. Next slide, please. Our daily lives are inundated with advertisements which deliberately attempt to shape our views, morals, attitudes and actions towards individual and society at large. An advertisement, being an inextricable content of media, outlines and shapes gendered notions about what it means to be a woman or a man and how women and men should behave in a society. See, the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19, we all know this, have fallen harder on women since they bear the burden of care work as schools close and family members suffer from ailments. And the burden doubles for for an employed woman who works from home and works for home simultaneously. Since visibility of women in advertisement necessarily does not affirm gender sensitive attitude, it is essential to examine the advertisements in order to validate whether pandemic concerns are adequately addressed from gender perspective or merely overlooked. Next slide, please. Considering the significance of everyday socio-economic and cultural experiences of women of post-pandemic Bengal, my study attempts to survey how women's roles have been constructed in post-pandemic Bengali print advertisements published between March 2020 and September 2021, that is still today. The study also aims to locate whether there is any change or shift in the portrayal of women in the post-pandemic print advertisements concerning the pandemic crisis women have been enduring. For this particular study, I have concentrated on Bengali advertisements, print advertisements published in Anandabajar Potrika, Ei Shomoy, Shangbad Pratidin, and Ajkal between March 2020 and September 2021. And I'm primarily focusing on product advertisements. And now, before I present, I must mention that since I will be focusing on Bengali print advertisements, my presentation at certain point will be a bilingual one. I'll start with statement and validate each statement on patriarchal expectation through these advertisements. Next slide, please. You look beautiful, but you look perfect if you lose weight. Sarvinji, next slide. We can see here two advertisements. Number one at the left is on bodyline fitness accessories, and on the right there is that Fatco slimming capsule. Both are promoting the fitness mantra, quote unquote. Fitness and immunity boosting seems primary concern during this pandemic. It is not just about man, but also about women who can use the fitness accessories to stay strong and physically fit and thereby heading towards a better future where she can assert perfection in terms of the fitness of her body. But we must remember that these advertisements, as you can very well perceive, uh, use the term fitness as a metaphor for quote unquote slim body. We never see the portrayal of a healthy, flabby woman being too fit. It is not unnatural, it is not unexpected that a healthy, flabby woman can also be fit, but she is never portrayed in this type of advertisement. So here lies the patriarchal prejudice. The woman in the fat go slimming capsule, that is the advertisement on the right, seems to endorse some kind of style statements through the product, and she typically represents beauty stereotype. Next slide, please. Girls are not girls without long hair. Do not cut it. Next slide. The advertisement on the left is on Kesh King hair oil, and this advertisement this product is being promoted by Juhi Chawla. The celebrity endorsement is very much there. And Arvindji, next slide, please. Nisha, another natural henna-based hair color product, and Ashwini hair oil at the right side. So the women in this advertisements, in these four advertisements, appear in decorative role with a connotation of stylish looks through luscious hair. This is a very common stereotypical rendering of a woman in advertisements. You know, the key objective of the character is to portray the stereotype associated with the physical appearance with respect to gender, that is beauty, attractiveness, gorgeousness, etc. in case of a woman. So legendary sociologist Goffman, in his seminal work, Gender Advertisements, quote unquote, records that advertisements do not portray the way men and women actually behave. Instead, they impose an artificial depiction of men and women, which has been categorized by Goffman as the quote unquote artificial look. So here we can see women being present as an epitome of such an ideal beauty which is practically impossible to achieve. So look at this hair. I mean the volume of this hair, the voluminous fluffy hair in the advertisement for Kesh King in the previous slide and Nisha in this slide. Look at this advertisement. This is practically impossible to achieve. Long hair, long strong hair is achievable, but this sort of voluminous fluffy hair, considering the pollution impact, is little difficult to achieve nowadays. Nothing related to pandemic has been directly mentioned in three of the advertisement except the Ashmini hair oil. We can see Rachana Banerjee at the right side. At the right side, you can see Rachana Banerjee, popular Bengali film actress, and she is wearing this green sari, also using this mask, and there is a clear message in the advertisement at the top of the advertisement promoting pandemic protocol of social distancing. And three of the women's domain are unidentifiable except the woman in Nihar advertisement standing outside with her bicycle. Arvindji, can you go back? Can you just go back? Yes. This woman, she is standing with her bicycle outside. So we can see beauty is still an quote unquote inside concern. Next slide. Next. Yes. Beauty defines women. So glam up yourself. Next one. Next slide. For healthy and glowing skin, a woman must use this Roop mantra, which is an Ayurvedic product. The advertisement on the left, where we can see Pretty Zinta. Regular use of the products will make the skin smooth, shiny, squishy, and it is already pointed out by Mallika Das, who has done her legendary work on gender and advertisement with particular reference to Indian print advertisement and television advertisement. She mentions that Indian advertisements take after global trend in several ways, with women being depicted more often as younger in advertisements for beauty products like soap, cream, hair oil, shampoo, and so on. So we can very well visualize the presence of the celebrity actress Preeti Zinta for the promotion of the product on the left side. She appears to us a beauty stereotype in this advertisement, while a celebrity endorsing a product is very common. The role played by Preeti here seems an advisory or recommendatory one. COVID-related safety measures are being mentioned here too in this advertisement where Preeti Zinta is there. On the other hand, Kareena Kapoor plays the decorative role along with the celebrity endorsement to the product. No pandemic concerns find place here and it merely talks about glowing skin like moon. এখন পান চাঁদের মতো উজ্জ্বল চেহারা. So more or less like glowing skin like moon. Again, the reference to quote unquote moon seems too cliched and patriarchal. So the next slide, please. Yes, both of the jewelry ads we can see in order to achieve beauty, women must deck themselves up with jewelries. Personal adornment of jewelry besides enhancing beauty symbolizes number one, status, two, wealth, and number three, assets. It also excites the sense of prized possession and stimulates aesthetic satisfaction. This is an age-old patriarchal tradition which is re-echoed in the advertisement of Jaya Lucas and Reliance Jewels. Next slide. Arvindji, next slide. Working from home or working for home? That's the question. Next slide. The most significant point about these advertisements is that the female figure, primarily the mother figures are posited as solely responsible for the healthcare issue of the entire family. In the Metro Milk, that is the advertisement on the left side, we find the mother training her daughter in yoga in order to boost immunity. And on the right, the Vaseline advertisement depicts a mother who is taking care of her daughter's tender skin. The next, this one. Yes. See the Labolia advertisement. You, uh, you have the power to protect your family. Disinfect hard surfaces, sanitize soft surfaces, deodorize surfaces, and air. That has been the tagline of this particular advertisement. So the mother appears as a decision maker, recommending the use of Labolia spray for the well-being of the family. The Sanofi ad on the right side, as you can see, propagates vaccination of a child this child is being held by his mother, which symbolizes a mother's duty to her child. So health and hygiene is... Thank you, Malini.
We are hearing some sound. I don't know why. From behind.
Should I continue? Is it all right now?
Please, Amrita, continue.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. So the Sanofi ad propagates vaccination of a child who is held by his mother, symbolizing a mother's duty for her child. So we can see health and hygiene is related to the better reproduction of family ideals and values and pivots on the just, clean and hygienic figure of the woman too. Next slide, please. Now, what is visible? So next one. Family issues are primarily settled by women, whereas professional career is always important for men. So again, very patriarchal projection. So on the left side, we can see the man. It is clearly being asserted work from home. Both employed men and women across professions are working from home during this pandemic crisis, but only the men are represented. Unfortunately, not a single woman has been portrayed as working from home. I have studied more than 325 advertisements from these four newspapers, from these four dailies. I have not come across a single advertisement where there is that clear tagline or there is a clear message that or clear display that women are working from home. So this is very patriarchal indeed and little unexpected at a time when we all are working and we are expecting some kind of change in the narrative of advertisement. And the right advertisement on the right side, we can see discover healthcare with India's most trusted Scott Agile products. So again, we see a celebrity endorsement in the advertisement on the right side. Here, the celebrity being Arun Govil, hero of Ramchandra in the TV serial Ramayana. The man here is merely playing the advisory role, although whether he is using the product for his family is not so clear. So every time women are placed within the space of an advertisement, promoting a product like hand sanitizer or something else, she's being placed within the territory of the family. She's doing some kind of family work. Either she's engaged with the elderly of the family or she's taking care of the children or something like that. But here, we find a man only recommending this thing to be used for the sake of the family, for the betterment of the family. So he is just the instructor. Again, a hierarchical representation for man prevailing during this pandemic crisis. Next slide. Men will be men, women will be women. Next, please. Advertisement for two genders of the same product. So Metro Milk is meant for boosting immunity. It is being written in Bangla, Doodh Khan immunity bar. So drink milk and increase your immunity. That's the tagline of this advertisement. Therefore, Metro Milk is meant for boosting immunity, but it tends to project a woman and man as per the expectation of patriarchal society. So woman in Tanpura is a stereotypical representation. She could have been placed with a guitar. Why not a guitar? Why not a saxophone? But unfortunately, Indian society expects a traditional portrayal of women in advertisement, and advertisers are just willing to cater to the requirement of the society. They are doing the same. The man, on the other hand, reasserts his masculine power through his association with quote-unquote sports, which is exclusively a male-centric domain in India. His athlete build reiterates his quote-unquote macho traits. Next slide, please. Next slide, Arvindji. Real estate advertisement, Gigantica. Uh, we find the narrative of a selfie freak mother, which is a demeaning representation of a mother-daughter duo on the left side. The house serves as a metaphor for escalating the notion of beauty stereotype again. For the same product, this Gangetica product, we can see that with a health conscious man talking about his fascination for multi-gym. Again, a very biased representation. Next slide. LIC advertisements. In both of the advertisements, we can see women playing passive roles. Either the man is leading or the man is having greater function ranking. See the sequence at the right, see the sequence in the advertisement on the right side. Girl, boy, woman, man. So he is having the highest function ranking. This is a concept developed by uh, Goffman. And he's also having the bigger relative size compared to the size of the others. He is represented largely. And in the advertisement on the left side, you can see the woman is, she is standing, and it is as if the man is guarding her, protecting her. So this is the financial matter where male decision in the family is the ultimate decision till today. But in case of family building, in case of taking care of the inside issues of a family, it is the sole responsibility of a woman. Next slide. Way forward. So sometimes there are certain exceptions which make us really, really hopeful. Next slide, please. The left advertisement at the left side, Hector 2021. Look at the tagline. Our workforce is 33% women. Our vision is to make it 50%. Celebrating the 50,000 hectare made entirely by the women of MG. And look at the advertisement at the right side. We have to build our, I'm just translating it in English. আমাদের বাসস্থান গড়ে তুলতে সবাই একসাথে, এর জন্য বিনিয়োগ একসাথে. So we have to build our house and we have to invest together. Equal rights, equal responsibilities. They are painting the wall. Looking at the function ranking or the relative size of the woman, it seems larger than the man in the advertisement on the right side. So according to McKinsey report 2021, Women make up 39% of global employment, but account for 54% of overall job losses during pandemic. Mind it, 54% of overall job losses. So amid this tumultuous crisis, the vision of ACTA 2021 brings forth gender equality in workforce. This is definitely a positive stand, and the UTI advertisement on the right side talks about equal rights and equal responsibilities, both in terms of right to property and investment. Again, gender-friendly assertion. Next slide. Exceptionally, during this pandemic crisis, we perceive women, you know, in the profession of nursing in many advertisement, acknowledging the contribution of frontline workers, which is which is quite opposite to what has been depicted earlier. Both Sanjeevan and Kothari Institute of Nursing, in both of that advertisement, we find nurses being present and promoting the courses on nursing. So it's a positive representation in the sense that they were never visible earlier. Even visible, the number was so poor that it couldn't be counted in that way. Although women although women appeared in the role of doctors earlier, uh, my screen is gone. So my PPT is gone. Arvindji, could you please? Arvindji.
Arvindji, Arvindji, are you here?
Yes, yes, yes. Just don't worry, this is the last slide. All the women appeared in the role of doctors earlier. Breaking the hierarchy in profession for women too is quite visible. So to conclude, I must say there is a constant redoing and undoing of gender stereotypes in the advertisements I have shown. Since human mind is extremely gullible, the advertisers have to be conscious before projecting any specific gender ideal. So although disparity prevails, we have to be hopeful that this discrimination will gradually fade away someday. With this hope, I'm concluding. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me patiently. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury, for such a captivating and enriching deliberation. The way you portrayed women's representation in the current post-pandemic media has been very enriching, enticing, and extremely time relevant. Thank you so much. Now, I'm sure that there must be a plethora of questions for both our very erudite speakers. We'll try to address all, but I'm afraid due to paucity of time, if we can't address everyone, then please collaborate with us via mail. We'll be more than happy to answer you.
Yes.
Now opening the floor for question answers, please.
I have one question to Dr. Ganneri. Am I audible, Dr. Ganneri?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, ma'am.
Okay. Wonderful talks by the two speakers, I must say. Dr. Ganneri, you were basically discussing transnational activism of Indian feminists during the period 1930 to 60, right?
Yes, that's right.
We have found from your discussion that the Indian feminists who were representing India in the foreign countries during that time were basically urban women from the elite groups, right? After a gap of 60 years, I should say more than 60 years in fact, do you find any change in the Indian scenario? That is, Indian women representing their own country, not from the urban group, from the rural group, and not from the elite group.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So, should I be taking all the questions together, or are we taking um, questions and answers on a one?
You can answer accordingly. You can
Okay.
answer one by one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Malini.
Thanks.
So let me offer some thoughts on this very important question that has been raised of representation and elite women being at the forefront of, so-called elite women being at the forefront of most international public fora. And what is the situation today? If we look at the way international politics has evolved and the way that there have been changes in the way deliberations happen today, whether you really don't need to be physically present. You can be afar, you can be at a distance. So this whole question of just an urban woman being able to represent the majority of women, that doesn't really hold anymore. If you look at global arena like sports, for example, we have only rural women in most of the global sporting arenas. So be it the Olympics or be it the Paralympics or any of these important events where, again, India is being represented. We have women from rural areas in large numbers. If you look at diplomacy and high politics, we need to ask what has changed even when we think of men who are representing India in diplomacy and high politics. Has anything changed as far as the overall way diplomacy and high politics is structured in India so that different women get opportunities or different men get opportunities? I have my doubts regarding that. In theory, though, things are open for representation for anyone. When we actually look at what is happening on the ground, in many ways, the power of the elite because of language skills, whether it is the ability to speak in English and able to converse in this language, or political capital or cultural capital, the very possibility of eating with an international audience with the spoon and fork. All these things still remain very difficult in terms of newer and newer groups to be able to break into these high positions. So it's a very unsatisfactory answer.
I was just wondering that the male politicians, they are not always from the urban group and from elite groups, but in case of women politicians, do you think that the scene has changed a bit?
I would say so. In fact, when you mentioned the male politicians not being from urban milieu, I was just thinking of many of these current crop of leaders, and this understanding that at the world stage India has emerged as a power and so on and so forth, and but many of them are novices in terms of international diplomacy because they've never held political portfolios earlier. It's still at least at the national stage when we are talking about, it's a party that has not held power for many years. So yeah, so a lot of people, you're right in that when you're saying that a lot of so-called non-elite people are also rising to the top. So yeah, but with women, I would say things are changing, but rather slowly, not not as much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. I will give it a thought. I will give it a thought a bit more, I think.
Thanks again. Thanks again.
Dr. Ganneri, we have another question for you. Question given by Manjuri Ghosh. She asks that, don't you think that the class these women come from already gave them a lot of visibility and empowerment? And what about the men in their lives? Dr. Ganneri, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Manjari, for that question. I agree with you that the class that they came in gives them a lot of ostensible cultural and political capital. But if you delve a bit deeper, things do not appear to be as simple as they at once appear. For example, I want to quote from the life of Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. So she was from the princely family and obviously very wealthy, uh, traveling abroad at the drop of a hat. But um, but her entry into political life and politics happened at the age of 40. Now, why was it that, what was she doing till she was almost 40? And it is important that in her autobiographical outpourings, wherever she's written a little bit about herself, she was, from what I know and can well imagine, she was an extremely private person. But the little that I heard from from her published letters and so on, it does become very clear that her parents resisted the idea of her participating in politics. So she waited in many ways for both her parents to pass away. So her father died in 1930 and her mother had died earlier in 1924, and it is only then that she entered politics. And in fact, she had conferred with Gandhi about her predicament. She had wanted to join politics after 1915 and 1919, but Gandhi, holding the position that it was from the point of view of middle class respectability and patriarchal values, he always insisted that women seek permission from the men in the family before they enter politics. And he advised her to stay away from politics till her parents consent. And obviously the parents never consented, and she had to wait for them to pass on and move on into another world before she could enter politics. So so in my presentation, I pointed out that while Mehta, Hansa Mehta had very supporting husband in Jivraj Mehta and a very, very progressive father, and that facilitated her overall political outlook. So if we compare both Amrit Kaur and Mehta, both seem to be elite women. Both seem to be educated women. Both seem to be wealthy, at least more than normal, with more than normal riches. But if you look at the circumstances of their entry into politics, if you look at the opportunities, they are rather different. And of course, again, Mehta and Kaur have different trajectories. Mehta took up the position in the UN as a representative of India, and after that she did not hold too many national level positions. She went into education, so she became vice chancellor and so on. But Amrit Kaur was very much into high politics. So she was the health minister for 10 years, and after also being eased out from her position as health minister, she remained fairly powerful. She continued to remain the president of AIMS, and she was very active in the WHO. She was well connected with the international health bureaucracy. So the circumstances of their initial lives were rather different, and their entry into politics was rather different, but eventually their careers spanned in different ways. So when we are thinking of class, when we are thinking of opportunity, when we are thinking of possibilities, uh, probably a little bit more closer reading into the circumstances of women's life tells us as to what just does not enable a woman's entry into politics, but also what is it that sustains women's continued participation in politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganneri, for pointing out the intersectionalities between gender, class, and politics. It's really been so encouraging all the more. Now there has been an overwhelming outpour of praise in our chat box. People are all praises for both our eminent speakers. There's Uma Biswas, Piyali Chandra, all of them are telling it's just been invigorating and thought-provoking. Dr. S. Basu, Navaruna, so all of them are all praises for all our deliberations. On this note, I just want to add to one thing of Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury about her, about her views and her perspectives of her empirical evidences on studying 325 advertisements and where no particular mention of women working from home has been made. That's really been an eye-opening thing for all of us. So, what do you think, Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury?
Malini, I think I have a question. Okay, I'm following the chat box and I have a question. Will you allow me to answer the question right now?
Sure. Please.
Okay, Dr. Krishna Chaudhary. He has written that it has been seen in most of the advertisements that percentage of female face are more than male. So you think females are very properly used or exploited in marketing? Absolutely, I completely agree because uh, uh, they are very often, inserted within the space of advertisement where their presence is not necessary. For example, shaving cream, razor, fair and handsome cream. This kind of advertisement, very often we perceive that women are unnecessarily placed within the space of these advertisements. It, in a way, directs towards directs us towards further objectification of female body. She comes in a decorative role and she is the passive figure within the space. She doesn't have any active role. So I must say that women are rather devalued and women's images are misused very often in order to promote product, in order to, in order to cater to certain marketing strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury. It's really been very apt and precise your answer. I think
I
that
have one question, Amrita. Can I ask you?
Sure, ma'am.
I was just wondering that, well, you also had a very beautiful presentation regarding the dominance of patriarchy in advertisement. But regarding the correlation between COVID pandemic and patriarchy in advertisement, do you have any data regarding both the male members and the female members of different households? They're doing works from home and the domestic chores are performed mainly by women and not by men. In some cases, not at all. In some cases, partially, but to a very little extent. Do you have any data?
Yes, ma'am, you are actually provoking me to do a kind of statistical analysis. I have collected advertisement. I have already mentioned, ma'am, I have studied more than 330, I have said, but considering the advertisement published in the month of March, I got some advertisements later on. So it is more than 350 right now. So yes, there is a pattern. There is a pattern in the representation of both men and women, which is a very nuanced one. And I can very well, if I study those advertisements thoroughly, I can classify certain categories. For, you have already set an example, like you have already mentioned how men are pitching into household job, whether women are, doing other works or they are fully focusing on the household activities. This
Or,
kind of,
and
yes,
also, if there is only one computer in the household,
yes.
who is getting lion's share for doing work from home, the male or the female member?
It is invariably, it is man, it is the male member of the family who is getting the lion's share, because I have already mentioned, not a single woman has been placed as working from home. Rather, they have been always placed as working for home, working for the family members. They are taking care of the elderly members, and this representation can well be classified into statistical data. And I feel more inspired to do it, because when you have raised it, you are actually provoking me to this kind of, to do this kind of analysis. And I'll try to do it, and definitely I'll show you that in future.
Thank you so much, Amrita.
My pleasure, ma'am.
Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury, we have another question. Rupkatha Mitro, she has asked that my question is about a specific product. The consumption of certain products like Kesh King are consumed across several socio-economic sections of society. They are highly attracted to visuals, no matter how misleading. To cite a scene from a movie called Do Pae Se Do Ki Do, we saw one more commercialization. What are your views? What are your thoughts on it, ma'am?
Uh, I must say that I haven't watched this particular movie you are referring here. Yes, Kesh King, and in fact, Ashini hair oil is such a fair hair oil, such a product which is being used across economic sections of the society. And yes, to a certain extent, I am also agreeing to the fact, to your assertion, to your statement that they are highly attracted to the visuals, no matter how misleading. Because yes, the it, the way women are being depicted in these particular advertisements highlight a thrust on the beauty aspects of that particular woman. And even when it is unrealistic, as I have already mentioned, it has been theoretically and both practically proven by several scholars that we have a tendency to achieve that artificial look, quote unquote. Whatever the product is, we have that tendency to achieve that artificial look. In order to achieve that artificial look, we always tend to buy product in spite of judging the product whether that particular product is at all useful for that particular consumer or not. And so in this, regarding this thought which you have elaborated in our chat box, I completely agree with you.
I hope Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury has given a very rightful answer to you, Rupkatha. Now we are almost reaching the verge of our program. Yes, now I would request Srimati Mahua Roy, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology and Joint Coordinator, Women's Studies Center, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks. Over to Srimati Mahua Roy.
Thank you, Malini. Thank you. It is an honor for me to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Women's Studies Center and Women's Studies Department, Lady Brabourne College. At the very outset, I would like to thank our two distinguished speakers of today's national webinar, Dr. Namrata R. Ganneri and Dr. Amrita Basu Roy Chowdhury, for their excellent, insightful, and very intriguing presentations. While Dr. Ganneri's outstanding presentation talks about the unexplored charters in relation to transnational activism of Indian feminists in length and breadth. Dr. Basu Roy Chowdhury's presentation explores very well the undervaluation of women's portrayal in advertisements today. The presentations, I feel, have left us with ample scope for further negotiations in both the spheres. And I'm sure all the participants of the webinar today has benefited immensely from the two outstanding presentations. Thank you, Dr. Namrata Ganneri and Dr. Amrita Basu Roy Chowdhury for your wonderful, wonderful presentation today. I extend my deep gratitude to our Madam Principal, Professor Shuli Sarkar, for her constant encouragement, support and guidance, without which the national webinar today would not have been possible. Thank you, Madam Principal. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank our external advisors to the Women's Studies Center, Dr. Aparna Bandhopadhyay and Dr. Bashubi Chakraborty, and Srimati Ruby Pal and Professor Sanjukta Dash, internal advisors to the Women's Studies Center, for their support and guidance. I would also like to express my gratefulness to Dr. Parna Ghosh, Associate Professor of English and Coordinator, Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, without whose unvarying support and guidance, coordinating the minute specifications of the webinar would not have been possible. Thank you, Parnadeep. I extend my thanks to Srimati Shikha Paul, Associate Professor of Sociology and Head of the Department of Women's Studies, for her spontaneous acceptance for the collaboration and extending her help and support wherever needed. I would also like to thank all the members of the Women's Studies Center for their dedication and hard work for the center. A special thanks to Dr. Malini Mukherjee, Faculty, Department of Women's Studies, for conducting the webinar so well. Thank you, Malini. I thank Mr. Arvind Prasad and his team at AAA Tech for providing the necessary technical support which enabled the smooth completion of the webinar today. Last but not the least, I thank our students and all the other participants, colleagues across the nation, researchers for joining us and making the webinar a success. Thank you to all. Have a very good evening. Thank you.